I still remember the exact moment my heart shattered at my father's birthday dinner. My brother Travis called my journalism career a joke while everyone watched. Dad laughed loudest, adding, "She's always been a failure. 5 years of exhausting work dismissed in seconds by the people whose approval I wanted most." That night, I drove home, believing they might be right. I never imagined that within weeks, they'd be watching me on international television, or that my investigation would trigger congressional hearings and change everything between us forever. Growing up, I always knew I wanted to be a journalist. While other kids in my small Pennsylvania town dreamed of becoming teachers or nurses, I carried a little notebook everywhere, documenting everything from neighborhood gossip to school board meetings. By high school, I was editor of the school newspaper, breaking stories about funding misappropriation that even the local paper hadn't caught. My father never understood my passion. An electrical engineer with a practical mind, he valued stable careers with predictable outcomes. My mother, though quieter about it, shared his pragmatism. But it was my older brother Travis who became the golden child, following our father's advice to pursue a sensible career in financial analysis. Every family gathering became a showcase for Travis's accomplishments. His promotion, his company's growth projections, his new house in the suburbs. "Your brother knew exactly what he wanted and went after it," Dad would say at holiday dinners, while Travis nodded with practiced humility. No wasted time chasing fantasies. I tried not to let it hurt. After college, I took a job at the Morning Chronicle, a small but respected local newspaper, where I covered everything from city council meetings to community events. The pay was modest, and the hours were long, but every morning I woke up excited to chase down leads and uncover stories that needed telling. "When are you going to get a real job?" Travis would ask whenever we saw each other. "One with benefits and an actual future?" Even after 3 years at the Chronicle, where I'd worked my way up to covering more significant stories, my family still treated my career like a hobby I would eventually outgrow. My parents displayed Travis's business awards proudly in their living room. My journalism awards remained in a box in my childhood bedroom closet. 2 months ago, everything changed. A source who worked at Meridian Pharmaceuticals reached out after reading my series on healthcare accessibility. What started as background information about medication pricing quickly evolved into something much bigger. According to my source, Meridian had been falsifying clinical trial data for their blockbuster arthritis drug, arthroxin, hiding severe side effects that had allegedly caused several deaths. For weeks, I verified details, cross-referenced documents, and cultivated additional sources. My editor, Grace, was cautiously optimistic, but warned me about going against a company with Meridian's resources. "This could be your breakthrough piece, Delinda," she said, "but tread carefully. These people play hardball." The timing seemed perfect. My father's 65th birthday dinner was coming up, and for once, I'd have something impressive to share. Maybe this time, they'd see my work had value. Maybe this time, they'd be proud. The night of the dinner, I dressed carefully in my best navy blue dress and drove to my parents' house with a flutter of anticipation in my stomach. Everyone was already there when I arrived. Mom and Dad, Travis and his wife Stacy, my Aunt Linda and Uncle Pete. The dining room was warm with conversation and the smell of Mom's famous pot roast. Throughout appetizers, Travis dominated the conversation with stories about his recent business trip to Chicago. I listened politely, waiting for my turn. When there was finally a lull during the main course, I cleared my throat. "I have some exciting news about work," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm working on a major investigative piece about pharmaceutical fraud that could have national implications." Before I could continue, Travis looked up from cutting his meat. "Still writing those little stories for that tiny paper?" he asked, his voice carrying a note of amusement that made my stomach clench. The dining room suddenly felt too warm as all eyes turned toward me. I forced a smile, determined to push through. "Actually, this investigation could be really significant. I've uncovered evidence that Meridian Pharmaceuticals falsified safety data for arthroxin. People have died, and the company covered it up." My Aunt Linda raised her eyebrows with genuine interest. "That sounds serious, Delinda." Before she could ask more, Travis snorted. Come on, sis. You've been chasing these so-called big stories for years now. When are you going to admit your career is a joke? The words hit like a physical blow. I looked to my mother, whose eyes dropped to her plate, then to my father, hoping he might defend me. Instead, he chuckled and raised his wine glass toward Travis. She's always been a dreamer, never a doer, Dad said, shaking his head. Always been our family failure. The room went silent, except for the soft clink of silverware. My Uncle Pete suddenly became very interested in his mashed potatoes. Aunt Linda tried changing the subject to her garden, but her words faded into background noise as blood rushed to my ears. Delinda has always had creative interests, my mother finally offered weakly. There's nothing wrong with that. Her tepid defense somehow hurt worse than the direct attacks. In their eyes, my career wasn't just unsuccessful, it was a childish phase I refused to outgrow. Travis's wife, Stacy, perhaps sensing my distress, asked about my apartment's recent renovation, but the damage was done. I answered questions mechanically through dessert, then made an excuse about an early morning meeting. Don't work too hard breaking those world-changing stories, Travis called as I gathered my purse, earning another laugh from my father. In my car, I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Hot tears blurred the road ahead as memories flooded back. Travis mocking my first byline in the high school paper. My father suggesting journalism school was a waste of money. My mother gently proposing teaching as a more suitable alternative. Years of subtle and not-so-subtle messages that my chosen path was frivolous and doomed to failure. My apartment felt emptier than usual when I arrived home. I kicked off my heels and collapsed onto my couch, too exhausted even to change out of my dress. The half-finished draft of my Meridian article sat open on my laptop, suddenly seeming naive and pointless. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was chasing shadows while my peers built real careers. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Lovely seeing you tonight. Dad had a wonderful birthday. No acknowledgement of what happened. No apology. Just the usual pretense that everything was fine. I was about to turn off my laptop when a new email notification appeared. The sender was listed only as Meridian Insider, an anonymous address my source used for our communications. They're destroying documents tomorrow. Attached is proof the CEO knew about the deaths. This goes higher than just Meridian government officials were paid to look the other way. Be careful who you trust with this. The attachment contained internal emails between Meridian's CEO and the head of their research division discussing how to manage the arthroxin situation after 3 patients in the clinical trial suffered fatal strokes. More disturbing were emails suggesting that someone at the FDA had been paid to expedite approval despite the safety concerns. This wasn't just corporate negligence. This was deliberate fraud, conspiracy, and possibly manslaughter. I forwarded the emails to my personal account and stared at the screen in disbelief. The story had just grown exponentially larger and more dangerous than I'd initially realized. As the implications sank in, an unsettling thought occurred to me. While my family was dismissing my career as a joke, I had stumbled onto the biggest story of my life. Sleep eluded me that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Travis's dismissive laugh and saw my father's disapproving shake of the head. By 5 in the morning, I gave up trying and made coffee instead. With the bitter liquid warming my hands, I made a decision. I would channel every ounce of hurt into my investigation. I called in sick to the office, but texted Grace privately about the new developments. She called back immediately. This is explosive stuff, Delinda. But these are serious accusations against powerful people. Are you absolutely certain about your source? As certain as I can be. The documents appear authentic, and details match with other information I've gathered. Come to my office at noon. Back entrance. Don't talk to anyone else about this yet. The next weeks passed in a blur of 16-hour days. I created a detailed timeline of arthroxin's development, approval, and the subsequent patient deaths. I cultivated new sources, a lab technician who'd been pressured to alter test results, a marketing director who'd quit after learning about the cover-up, a doctor who had reported unusual stroke patterns in his patients taking the drug. My apartment transformed into an investigation hub, with sticky notes covering one wall and backups of documents stored in multiple locations. Each new piece of evidence confirmed the same disturbing pattern. Meridian knew their blockbuster drug caused dangerous blood clots in certain patients, but buried that information to protect their $4 billion investment. Grace assigned me a dedicated researcher and gave me time off from regular assignments. The Chronicle might be small, but it had a reputation for integrity that larger papers sometimes lacked. "This could be the story that puts us on the national map," she said during one late-night strategy session. "But it could also bring serious blowback. Meridian will fight with everything they have." While I immersed myself in the investigation, my family continued their regular group texts. Travis shared photos from a company golf tournament where he'd networked with executives. My parents announced they were planning a cruise. My mother sent gentle inquiries about why I'd missed Sunday dinner 2 weeks in a row. I replied with vague excuses about work deadlines, unable to explain that I was barely sleeping, surviving on takeout, and speaking to sources at all hours. Even if I told them, they wouldn't understand the significance. In their minds, I was still just writing little stories for a tiny paper. One evening, after confirming a crucial connection between Meridian's medical director and an FDA official who had fast-tracked Arthroxin's approval, I realized I hadn't left my apartment in 3 days. Forcing myself to take a break, I walked to a nearby cafe for real food and fresh air. When I returned to my car in the darkened parking lot, a folded paper was tucked under my windshield wiper. Thinking it was an advertisement, I almost threw it away. Then I unfolded it and felt my blood freeze. "Stop digging or you'll be buried with what you find." I scanned the parking lot, suddenly aware of how isolated it was. Had someone followed me? How did they know my car? I drove home, taking random turns and checking my rearview mirror constantly, my heart pounding against my ribs. That night, I pulled my blinds shut and double-checked all my locks. The threat could be a bluff, a scare tactic to derail the investigation. But it confirmed something important. I was on the right track, and Meridian was worried. When I showed the note to Grace the next morning, her usual unflappable demeanor cracked. "This changes things," she said, tapping her fingers on her desk. "We need legal involved, and we should consider bringing in outside resources. You want to shelve the story? I want to make sure you're protected physically and legally." This just became a lot bigger than a regular investigation. She was right. Within days, more concerning events followed. My primary source stopped responding to emails. My apartment showed subtle signs of entry. A drawer slightly ajar, papers moved on my desk, though nothing was taken. And a black sedan with tinted windows appeared with suspicious frequency on my street. I began taking precautions, changing my routine, backing up files to secure cloud storage, staying with a friend for a few nights, without telling anyone my whereabouts. Despite the mounting pressure, I refused to back down. Each intimidation attempt only strengthened my resolve to expose the truth. My breakthrough came when a medical researcher who had worked on the Arthroxin trials contacted me with access to the original, unaltered data. The contrast with the published results was damning, showing a stroke risk 26 times higher than Meridian had reported. As I was processing this new evidence, my phone rang with Travis's number. "Hey, sis, you missed Mom's birthday lunch. Dad says you're avoiding family now that you've been called out on your career choices." "I'm working, Travis," I replied, too tired for his games. "Still playing reporter?" The familiar, mocking tone made my jaw clench. "When are you going to grow up?" I ended the call without responding, newfound determination flowing through me. They had no idea what I was dealing with, the risks I was taking, or the truth I was about to expose. Their opinion of my career no longer mattered. That same afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Vanessa Clark, an executive producer at National Herald News, one of the largest news organizations in the country. "We've heard whispers about your Meridian investigation," she said. "We'd like to discuss a potential collaboration. This story deserves a national platform." For a moment, I allowed myself to feel a flutter of validation. The National Herald was reaching out to me. Finally, recognition for my work. Then a sobering thought occurred to me. How exactly had they heard about my investigation? I'd be interested in talking, I said carefully. But I need to know how this reached you. Let's discuss in person. Our office is in Philadelphia? Tomorrow at 10? That night, I researched National Herald's board members and major advertisers, discovering something that made my stomach sink. Meridian Pharmaceuticals was one of their biggest advertisers, and a Meridian executive sat on their parent company's board. This wasn't a collaboration offer. This was a trap. The National Herald's offices occupied the top floors of a gleaming downtown skyscraper, a world away from the Chronicle's modest quarters. As the elevator climbed to the 38th floor, I mentally rehearsed how to handle the meeting without revealing the full scope of my investigation. Vanessa Clark met me in a glass-walled conference room with spectacular city views. Tall, immaculately dressed, with the polished presence of someone accustomed to television appearances, she greeted me warmly. "Delinda, I've been following your work for some time. Your series on healthcare inequity was excellent. Please, sit." 2 other people joined us. Marshall Green, the Herald's legal counsel, and James Whitaker, their chief editor. The air of corporate efficiency was intimidating, but I reminded myself that I held valuable information they wanted. "We'll get right to it," Vanessa said after brief introductions. "Your Meridian investigation has serious national implications. The Herald has resources the Chronicle simply doesn't: legal teams, research staff, national distribution. We could give this story the platform it deserves," added Whitaker. "While protecting you from potential fallout," Green emphasized. "Meridian is known to be aggressive with litigation." They outlined a proposal. I would share all my research, sources, and documentation with their team. The Herald would complete the investigation and publish under their banner, with me credited as a contributing reporter. They would handle any legal challenges from Meridian. And of course, there would be compensation, Vanessa concluded. $200,000 plus a 1-year contract with the Herald at double your current salary. The offer hit like a thunderbolt. $200,000 was more than 4 years' salary at the Chronicle. Financial security, national recognition, and protection from Meridian's inevitable retaliation. For a moment, I imagined calling Travis with news of my new position at the prestigious Herald. The stunned silence from my father would be satisfying beyond words. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully. "I'd need to review any agreement with my own counsel, of course." "Of course," Whitaker nodded. "We can provide a car to bring your materials over this afternoon." That was when I noticed the slight exchange of glances between them, the hint of relief in Green's posture. They were being too accommodating, too eager to get my documentation. "I'll need a few days to consider," I said, rising from my chair. "This is a significant decision." Vanessa's smile tightened, almost imperceptibly. "We're on a tight timeline. Exclusive stories have short shelf lives." 48 hours, I countered. "I'll have an answer for you then." Back at the Chronicle, Grace listened with growing concern as I recounted the meeting. $200,000 is a lot of money to offer a reporter from a local paper, she said, frowning. Something doesn't add up. We spent the rest of the day digging into the Herald's recent coverage of Meridian and pharmaceutical stories in general. A pattern emerged. Stories critical of pharmaceutical companies were routinely killed or watered down at the Herald. 3 investigative reporters had left under unusual circumstances after pursuing industry stories. "They're not looking to publish your story, Delinda," Grace concluded grimly. "They're looking to bury it." That night, my phone pinged with a text from my father. "Your mother says you're avoiding her calls. Travis mentioned you might have lost your job at the paper. Call us if you need help finding something more stable." The message stung, but differently now. They still saw me as a failure, still believed my career was a joke, while powerful people were actively trying to silence my reporting. The irony would have been amusing if it weren't so painful. I was about to turn off my phone when it rang with an unknown number. "Miss Walker?" The voice was male, unfamiliar, and tense. "This is Dr. Andrew Reeves. I was a clinical researcher for Meridian until yesterday. I understand you've been asking questions about arthroxin." "I have," I confirmed cautiously. "They fired me this morning, Said it was downsizing, but I know it's because I questioned the trial data. I have files they don't know. I kept safety reports that were altered before submission to the FDA. Can we meet? Not in person. Not yet. Too risky. His voice dropped lower. What you're investigating goes beyond just Meridian. There's a government connection. FDA officials were paid off, but it goes higher. Senators involved in the health committee received substantial donations before pushing for expedited approval. My apartment suddenly felt less secure. If senators were involved, how high did this really go? The Herald approached me. I told him. They want my research. Don't trust them, he said immediately. Their parent company has deep ties to pharmaceutical lobbies. If you give them your evidence, it disappears forever. After we hung up, I sat in the dark, weighing my options. The threat level had escalated significantly. This wasn't just about my career anymore. It was about truth, justice, and potentially saving lives. Arthroxin was still on the market, still being prescribed to thousands of unsuspecting patients. The next morning, my apartment door showed scratch marks around the lock. Nothing was taken, but my laptop had been moved from where I'd left it. The invasion of my personal space left me shaking with a mixture of fear and rage. At the office, Grace introduced me to Alan Mackenzie, a security consultant the paper had hired for my protection. You should vary your routes to work, switch up your routine, he advised, and you should consider staying somewhere other than your apartment for a while. That evening, as I packed a bag to stay with a colleague, my brother called again. Mom's worried about you, Travis said without preamble. She thinks you're depressed about your career stalling out. I'm fine, Travis. Just extremely busy with work. He laughed that familiar, dismissive laugh. What work? Writing about local bake sales? Come on, sis. Time to face reality. The comment ignited something in me, a flash of pure, clarifying anger. You have no idea what I'm working on or what I'm capable of. None of you do. Whoa, dramatic much? Look, we're having dinner at Dad's lake house this weekend. Mom wants you there. Try to be normal for once, okay? I hung up without responding. My brother's patronizing tone, once hurtful, now seemed almost comically misplaced. He was living in a different reality, one, where job titles and steady paychecks defined success, where rocking the boat was to be avoided at all costs. As I zipped my overnight bag, my secure email pinged with a message from Dr. Reeves, containing encrypted files with evidence even more damning than I'd anticipated. Arthroxin's problems weren't limited to the United States. Patients in clinical trials across Europe and Asia had experienced similar adverse events that had been systematically hidden. This wasn't just a national story. It was global, and suddenly, I knew exactly how to proceed. The Herald called precisely 48 hours after our meeting, as expected. Have you made your decision? Vanessa asked, her voice professionally pleasant, but with an undercurrent of tension. I have, I replied. I've decided to decline your offer. There was a pause, then. That's disappointing to hear. May I ask why? Let's just say our journalistic priorities seem different. Her tone chilled. I hope you understand what you're turning down, Delinda. The Chronicle can't protect you from what's coming if you pursue this story. Is that a threat, Vanessa? It's a professional courtesy. Meridian has destroyed careers over less. After hanging up, I sat at my desk, examining the choice I'd made. $200,000 would have changed my life. It would have bought my family's respect, proven I could succeed on their terms. For a fleeting moment, I'd been tempted not just by the money, but by the validation it represented. Grace placed a cup of coffee on my desk and sat across from me. You made the right call, did I? I just turned down life-changing money and career advancement. You turned down a bribe to bury the truth, she corrected. There's a difference. That afternoon, my phone rang with my father's number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. Delinda? Your mother's been trying to reach you for days. I've been busy, Dad. Too busy for family? Travis mentioned you sounded strange on the phone. Are you still upset about what was said at my birthday? You know we were just teasing. The casual dismissal of their cruelty as teasing felt like a fresh wound. It wasn't teasing, Dad. You and Travis publicly humiliated me about my career. You called me a failure. You're being oversensitive. Look, we're concerned about you. This journalism thing clearly isn't working out. Travis has a friend at his company who's hiring for an administrative position. Good benefits, stable income. The suggestion that I abandon my career to become someone's assistant was the final straw. I'm not looking for a new job, Dad. I'm in the middle of the biggest story of my career. There you go again, with the fantasy world. When are you going to grow up and get a real job? This is a real job. I'm a real journalist. He sighed heavily. Your mother wants you at dinner this Sunday. Please be there. After he hung up, I stared at the phone, a hollow feeling spreading through my chest. Nothing had changed. Despite everything I'd accomplished, despite the risks I was taking, they still saw me as deluded and unsuccessful. That evening, I met Dr. Reeves in person for the first time, at a quiet diner 30 miles outside the city. Thin and nervous, with constantly darting eyes, he slid a flash drive across the table. Complete internal documentation of the arthroxin trials, including the original adverse event reports and the altered versions submitted to regulators. There's also evidence of the international scope problems reported in trials conducted in London, Tokyo, and Berlin. Why are you doing this? I asked. You're risking everything. He stared into his untouched coffee. My sister was in the trial. She suffered a massive stroke 6 weeks after starting the medication. They claimed it was unrelated, but I knew better. I kept quiet then. I can't live with that anymore. His words hit me like a physical force. This wasn't about my career or my family's approval. It was about people who had died, and others who would die if the truth remained hidden. Back at my temporary lodging, I called a contact at the International Press Consortium, a global network of independent journalists dedicated to investigative reporting. The story has international implications, I explained. Meridian conducted trials in multiple countries and concealed adverse events across all of them. Send me what you have, said Julia Barnes, the IPC's executive director. If it checks out, we could coordinate a simultaneous release across multiple outlets worldwide. The possibility of international publication changed everything. Instead of one vulnerable local paper against a pharmaceutical giant, it would be dozens of outlets across multiple countries publishing simultaneously, too many to threaten or silence. Over the next week, I worked with the IPC to verify every detail and prepare for publication. The plan was set. The story would break simultaneously in 27 publications across 14 countries, with a primetime television segment on World News Network, one of the few major outlets not connected to pharmaceutical advertising. 3 days before publication, I received a formal cease and desist letter from Meridian's attorneys, threatening catastrophic legal consequences if the Chronicle published defamatory claims about arthroxin. Similar letters arrived at other participating publications. Standard intimidation tactics, Grace said after consulting with our legal team. They don't know what evidence we have. They're fishing. The pressure continued to escalate. My personal email was hacked. A black SUV followed me from the Chronicle offices to my friend's apartment. Dr. Reeves called to report that his home had been broken into. On Saturday night, 24 hours before publication, my mother called. Delinda, we're expecting you tomorrow at 5. Your father's grilled steaks. I had completely forgotten about the family dinner. With everything happening, it seemed trivial, yet a part of me wanted to see them before the story broke. Once it published, my life would change irrevocably. This might be my last chance to see my family as just their disappointing daughter, rather than as the journalist who exposed a global scandal. I'll be there, I promised. That night, I barely slept, rehearsing how to handle the family dinner without revealing what was about to happen. By morning, a new worry had emerged. What if publication affected my family? Meridian would be looking for ways to discredit me. Would they target my family for information? I called Grace with my concerns. Your family doesn't know anything about the investigation, she reassured me. They can't reveal what they don't know. Besides, once this breaks internationally, it'll be too big for Meridian to contain through intimidation. Still uneasy, I drove to my parents' lake house that afternoon. The scene was painfully normal. My father at the grill, my mother arranging a salad, Travis and Stacy lounging on the deck with drinks. For a moment, I envied their obliviousness. "There she is," my father called, spatula in hand. The prodigal daughter returns. Dinner proceeded with the usual dynamics. Travis dominated the conversation with stories about his recent success landing a major client. My parents asked perfunctory questions about my work, clearly expecting nothing significant. "Still at the Chronicle?" my father asked, cutting his steak. "Yes," I replied simply. "Heard from a buddy that print newspapers are all going under soon," he continued. "Digital media's the future. Some are adapting better than others," I said. Travis smirked. "But not the little local papers, right? They'll be the first to go." I focused on my plate, reminding myself that in less than 12 hours, everything would change. It wasn't worth the argument now. "Actually," my mother interjected, clearly trying to be helpful, "Travis mentioned an opening at his company, administrative work, but it could lead to something better." "I already have a career, Mom." Travis laughed. "Come on, sis. Playing reporter isn't a career. It's an extended college phase." Something in me snapped. After weeks of threats, stress, and fear followed by their continued dismissal, I couldn't stay silent. "You have no idea what real journalism is, Travis. None of you do. You think it's just writing fluff pieces and taking notes at press conferences? Real journalism means uncovering truths people in power want hidden. It means taking risks for the public good." "Whoa, dramatic," Travis said, exchanging an eye roll with my father. "It's not dramatic. It's reality. My reality. The one none of you have ever bothered to understand." My father put down his fork. "Now listen here, Delinda. We've supported you through this hobby of yours for years, but it's time to face facts. You haven't made anything of yourself. Travis has a house, a growing investment portfolio, career advancement. What do you have to show?" The familiar pain of their disapproval washed over me, but this time it was tempered with something new. Certainty. "Call us when you've done something worth talking about," my father added dismissively. I stood up, gathering my purse. "Watch the news tomorrow," I said quietly. As I reached my car, my secure phone rang with an unknown number. My heart raced as I answered. "Delinda, it's Julia from IPC. We have an emergency. Someone's attempting to hack our server network and the world news feed. They're trying to block tomorrow's publication." I drove straight from my parents' house to the Chronicle, breaking speed limits all the way. Grace had already assembled an emergency team in the conference room. Our tech department, legal counsel, and editors from the foreign and national desks. "Meridian somehow got wind of the coordinated release," Grace explained as I rushed in. "They're hitting every participating outlet with technical attacks and legal threats." Our tech director, Marcus, pulled up a digital map showing attempted breaches at news organizations across multiple continents. They've hired sophisticated hackers. Several outlets have already had their systems compromised. "What about our story?" I asked. "Our servers are secure for now," Marcus replied. "But they're specifically targeting the World News Network broadcast. That's the linchpin of the whole release. The television segment was critical. It would reach millions instantly and lend credibility that would be harder to dismiss. Without it, Meridian could more easily discredit the print and digital stories as fringe reporting." Julia from the IPC joined via video conference, her face tense. "We need to accelerate the timeline. If we wait until morning, they might succeed in blocking most outlets." "How soon can we go?" I asked. 3 hours, Julia said. "Midnight Eastern. We've alerted all participating publications. World News Network can break into regular programming with a special report." The next 3 hours passed in a blur of activity. I finalized my copy, recorded a remote interview for World News Network, and coordinated with outlets across different time zones. Each organization implemented extra security measures, with multiple backup plans for publication if their primary systems were compromised. At 11:30, I stepped outside for air, the weight of what was about to happen settling over me. Years of work, weeks of threats and intimidation, all leading to this moment. In half an hour, my life would irrevocably change. The truth would be out, and Meridian would be exposed, along with the government officials who had enabled them. My phone vibrated with a text from Travis. What was that cryptic comment about watching the news? Drama queen much? I didn't respond. He would find out soon enough. At precisely midnight, the Chronicle published my comprehensive investigation online, alongside 26 other publications worldwide. Simultaneously, World News Network interrupted their programming with a special report titled Deadly Deception, the Arthroxin Cover, Up. I watched from the Chronicle's conference room as the anchor introduced the segment. Tonight, an exclusive World News investigation reveals how one of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies deliberately concealed deadly side effects of its blockbuster arthritis drug, resulting in potentially hundreds of preventable deaths across multiple countries. Then my face appeared on screen, identified as Delinda Walker, investigative reporter, The Morning Chronicle. The surreal experience of seeing myself on international television momentarily distracted me from the gravity of the moment. For the next 20 minutes, the report detailed the evidence we had uncovered: the falsified trial data, the covered-up deaths, the payoffs to government officials, the international scope of the deception. Dr. Reeves appeared anonymously, his face obscured but his testimony devastating. By 12:30, social media was exploding. Major news organizations not originally part of the coordinated release were picking up the story. Meridian stock had begun plummeting in Asian markets, where trading was already open. By 1 in the morning, the Chronicle's website had crashed from unprecedented traffic. We quickly implemented our backup server. The story was spreading faster than even our most optimistic projections. Congressional representatives are already calling for investigations, Grace reported, scrolling through updates. The FDA has issued an emergency statement saying they're reviewing Arthroxin's approval. By 3 in the morning, the first official responses began rolling in. Meridian issued a terse statement calling the allegations categorically false and promising legal action. 2 senators named in our reporting as having received Meridian donations issued denials. The FDA announced it would hold an emergency meeting in the morning. At 4, exhausted but exhilarated, I finally checked my personal phone. 27 missed calls and dozens of texts. Most were from journalists and unknown numbers, but several were from my family. My mother had called 8 times, my father 4, Travis 11. I listened to Travis's most recent voicemail. Delinda, what the hell? You're all over the news. Dad's phone is blowing up with calls from friends who saw you on World News. Call us immediately. For the first time in hours, I laughed a release of tension, disbelief, and vindication all at once. While I had been fighting to publish the biggest story of my career, fighting against powerful forces trying to silence me, my family had been utterly oblivious. Now they couldn't ignore it any longer. Dawn was breaking as I finally left the Chronicle building. Security escorted me to a hotel where arrangements had been made for me to stay my name, and face were now too widely known for me to return to my apartment safely. As I checked in, the hotel's lobby television was showing my World News interview, now on its 4th replay of the morning. The front desk clerk did a double take, looking from the screen to me and back again. "That's you," she said, wide-eyed. "You're the one who broke the Arthroxin story." I nodded, too tired for words, and took my key card. In my room, I finally returned my mother's calls. "Delinda?" she answered immediately. "Are you okay? Why didn't you tell us what you were working on? Would you have believed me if I had?" I asked quietly. Her silence was answer enough. "I need to get some sleep, Mom. I've been up all night. We can talk later." "Your father wants to speak with you," she said quickly before I could hang up. There was rustling as the phone changed hands. "Delinda." My father's voice sounded different, uncertain, almost awed. "The phone has been ringing nonstop. My golf buddies, colleagues from work, even people I haven't spoken to in years. Everyone saw you on television. I told you to watch the news," I said simply. "Why didn't you tell us this was happening?" "I tried, Dad. At your birthday dinner. You and Travis laughed at me. You called me a failure." The silence stretched between us. "I need to sleep," I said finally. It's been a long night. Of course, he replied, uncharacteristically subdued. We'll talk later. As I drifted toward sleep, my phone lit up with a text from Travis. Holy shit, sis. You're trending on Twitter. Call me when you can. I turned off my phone and closed my eyes, too exhausted to savor the moment. The vindication I'd imagined feeling was muted by fatigue and the sobering reality of what lay ahead. The story was out, but the fight was far from over. Meridian would retaliate with everything they had. The real battle was just beginning. But for the first time in my career, I wouldn't be fighting alone. I had the truth on my side, public attention, and allies across the globe. And maybe, just maybe, I had finally earned my family's respect. The next 72 hours passed in a whirlwind of interviews, press conferences, and legal consultations. The Chronicle assigned me a media handler to manage the flood of interview requests from outlets around the world. Meridian Pharmaceuticals issued increasingly desperate statements, first denying everything, then blaming rogue employees, and finally announcing an internal investigation. By the end of the first week, the fallout was staggering. The FDA issued an emergency suspension of Arthroxin. Class action lawsuits were filed in 7 countries. 3 Meridian executives resigned. A congressional oversight committee announced hearings, and I was asked to testify. Through it all, I operated on adrenaline and caffeine, barely registering the seismic shift in my professional standing. My name appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Guardian. Journalism schools contacted me about guest lectures. Book agents inquired about memoir rights. I had been so focused on getting the truth out that I hadn't prepared for what would come after. The attention was overwhelming, and occasionally frightening. Security experts advised me on handling threats. The Chronicle hired protection for my apartment building after I received concerning messages. On the 8th day after publication, I finally agreed to meet with my family. We gathered at a private room in a restaurant, arranged by the Chronicle's security team to avoid press attention. My parents arrived first, looking tentative and uncertain expressions I'd never seen on them before. "Delinda," my mother said, embracing me with unusual emotion, "we've been so worried." My father stood awkwardly behind her, as if unsure of his place. "You look tired," he said finally. "It's been a busy week," I replied, the understatement bringing a small smile to my face. Travis and Stacy arrived minutes later. My brother had the decency to look embarrassed, avoiding direct eye contact as he sat down. "So," my father began, after we ordered, "this is what you've been working on all these months." "Yes, I tried to tell you at your birthday dinner." He shifted uncomfortably. "We owe you an apology for that night. We were unfair." The admission, though inadequate, was more than I'd expected from him. "Unfair doesn't begin to cover it," I said quietly. "You called me a failure. You dismissed years of hard work as a joke." Travis cleared his throat. "Look, sis, we were just trying to motivate you. You know, tough love." "That's not love, Travis. That's cruelty." The table fell silent. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We didn't understand," she said finally. "We didn't see the importance of what you were doing." "Because you never tried to," I replied. "None of you ever asked real questions about my work. You decided it wasn't valuable because it didn't fit your definition of success." My father looked down at his untouched food. "I was wrong," he said, the words clearly difficult for him. "What you've done, it's important. It matters. I see that now." "Everyone sees it now," Travis added. "My entire office is talking about you. People I respect are citing your reporting. It's impressive." The validation I had craved for so long now felt hollow. "I don't need your approval anymore," I said, surprising myself with the realization as I spoke it aloud. "I'm proud of my work, regardless of whether you understand its value." "We're trying to understand now," my mother said earnestly. "We've watched every interview, read all your articles." "Better late than never, I suppose," I said, not entirely forgiving, but willing to acknowledge the effort. "For what it's worth," my father added, "I am proud of you. What you did took incredible courage." The words I had longed to hear for years finally came, But their impact was different than I had imagined. They didn't fix the past hurt, but they opened a possibility for something new, a relationship based on mutual respect rather than judgment. "Thank you," I said simply. Over dinner, I explained the investigation in detail, the months of work, the threats, the international coordination. They listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed they were finally trying to understand my world. I had no idea investigative journalism was so intense, Travis admitted. "I always thought you were just writing articles." "That's because you never bothered to learn what I actually do," I said, but without the bitterness that would have colored the words before. "I'd like to learn now," he said, unexpectedly humble. "If you're willing to teach me." As we finished dessert, my father raised his water glass. To Delinda, who always knew her own path, even when we couldn't see it. The toast brought unexpected tears to my eyes. It wasn't a complete healing of old wounds, but it was a beginning. 3 months later, I sat in a congressional hearing room, prepared to testify about Meridian's deception. My family sat in the gallery behind me, a visible show of support that would have seemed impossible months earlier. Travis had taken time off work to be there, telling his boss that supporting his sister was non-negotiable. The hearing was broadcast nationally. I spoke for nearly 2 hours, detailing the evidence we had uncovered and answering pointed questions from representatives. When asked why I had pursued the story despite threats and intimidation, I thought carefully before answering. "Because truth matters," I said simply. "Because patients deserve to know what was being hidden from them. Because sometimes the most important stories are the ones powerful people don't want told." The investigation expanded beyond Meridian to include regulatory capture at the FDA and corruption within the approval process for multiple drugs. 6 months after my initial story broke, the Justice Department announced criminal indictments against 3 Meridian executives and 2 former FDA officials. A year after that fateful family dinner where my career had been dismissed as a joke, I stood on a stage in New York, accepting the Pulitzer Prize for investigative reporting. The Chronicle had gone from a respected local paper to a nationally recognized outlet, partly on the strength of our arthroxin reporting. My family sat in the audience, genuinely proud, not because my success now fit their definition of achievement, but because they had learned to value different kinds of impact. At the reception afterward, my father approached with 2 flutes of champagne, handing one to me. "Your mother found something last week when we were cleaning out the attic," he said. "Your high school newspaper with your first byline, the one about the school board misusing funds." I remembered it well the first time I'd experienced the power of uncovering truth. "I read it," he continued. "Really read it this time. It was excellent work, even then. I should have seen it." "We can't change the past, Dad." "No, but I can do better now." He hesitated. "I've started a scholarship fund at your old high school, for young journalists, in your name." The gesture touched me deeply. "Thank you. That means a lot." My mother joined us, followed by Travis and Stacy. My brother had undergone perhaps the most significant transformation of all. His corporate success still mattered to him, but he had developed a new appreciation for work with social impact. He had even started volunteering with a financial literacy program in underserved communities. "To think," he said, smiling ruefully, "all this started with me being a complete jerk at Dad's birthday dinner." "It started long before that," I corrected him. "But that night was a turning point. Sometimes we need to hit bottom before we can rise." Later that evening, I stood alone on the hotel balcony, reflecting on the journey of the past year. The arthroxin story had changed countless lives, patients who had been warned in time, families who had received answers about lost loved ones, a regulatory system forced to confront its failures. It had also changed me. I had discovered strength I didn't know I possessed, forged connections with journalists across the globe, and found my voice in ways I never anticipated. Most surprisingly, it had transformed my family. The people who once dismissed my career now valued not just my success, but the purpose behind it. We had found a new relationship based on mutual respect, rather than conformity to expectations. The path had been painful and fraught with danger, but standing on the other side, I felt a profound sense of peace. Success wasn't defined by others' recognition or approval. It came from staying true to your purpose, even when everyone around you questioned its value. I had learned that sometimes you have to be willing to stand alone in your convictions, and that when you do, you might discover you were never truly alone after all. Have you ever had to stand up for your passion or career choice when others didn't understand its value? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need encouragement to follow their own path. Thank you for listening. And remember, true success comes from believing in yourself even when others don't see your vision yet.